Washington State University. Go Cougs!
Hello and welcome to the second module in our course on collecting smartphone sensor data using iOS. In this module, we will be collecting sensor data from the device and displaying it on the device. And in the first part, we'll be focusing on the motion sensors. Recall that the motion sensors consist of the accelerometer, which gives us the movement of the device along the three axes relative to the device, and the gyroscope, which gives us the rotation about those axes. And we'll be making some changes to our sensor app in order to be able to access and display the motion sensor data on the screen here. So the first step to accessing the sensor data is to check for the availability of the sensors. Now, there's two ways that we could do this. The first way is we can require the device to have the specific sensors we're interested in. So if you remember, the info property list of our app has several properties. One of them is this required device capabilities. Now right now, the default app will just have the ARM v7 in there, but we can add in some more items, namely the accelerometer and the gyroscope, and then the device, the app will require the device to have those for it to even load. Now we could also check within our program to see if the sensors are available, and there are specific variables that we can check to see if the accelerometer or the gyro are available. Now, most of the devices today, especially the iPhone, the iPad, and the Apple Watch, have both of these sensors, so there's really not a lot of need anymore to check and see if those sensors are available. And we won't do that in our app either, but if there's a situation where the sensors may not be available, then this is how you can ensure that they are. The second issue with accessing the sensors is authorization. Now, sometimes sensor data can have some privacy issues in terms of revealing information about the user. And so we may need to receive authorization from the user in order to use the sensor data. Now for the motion sensors, we don't specifically have the user authorize it, but we do have to provide a reason for why we're using those sensors. And if we don't provide that reason, then the app will terminate without even running. Now the way that we achieve the authorization is by entering in the reason for why we want to access the sensors. Again, in our info property list, we're going to add a property called privacy motion usage description, and that will simply be the reason for why we want to access the motion sensors. Now at present in iOS 10, this is sufficient for us for our app to access the sensor data. But in future iOS versions, there may be a second step whereby the user is actually provided an alert saying this app wants to access the motion sensor data. It'll provide this reason, and then the user can agree or not. This is how it works for the GPS sensors that we'll be looking at in the later part of this module. Okay, so let's go into Xcode and add in this new property so that we'll be able to access the motion sensors. So I will go into Xcode and open our sensor app. And when last we were editing our sensor app, we had the split view, we had set up our storyboard, created all of the elements of the storyboard so that we could access them via outlets. and we could detect the tapping of the buttons using these actions. So for now, I'm going to get out of this split screen. So I'll X out of that, and I'm going to open up my file hierarchy side panel so I can get to our info property list. So again, down here is where you could enter those required device capabilities, but again, most devices have them, so we're not going to bother with that check right now. To add another property, namely this privacy property, we click on the plus here, and then we can scroll through the available properties, and here we are in the privacy section. You can see there's several of them. The one we're particularly interested in here is the motion usage description. So we'll click on that. And then we need to provide the reason for our motion usage. And make sure I get this right. So we said motion data improves the accuracy of behavioral analysis. Okay, so there's our reason for accessing the motion data. And so now we can go ahead and access it within our app, and because we have this reason, the app won't crash on us. Okay, so let's go back to the notes. So in this part, we looked again at the accelerometer and the gyroscope, which make up the motion sensors, and looked at how to check if they're available and to get authorization to use them. And then we made that change to our sensor app. So in the next part, we'll actually access the data and display it. And to do that, we'll be using iOS's core motion framework.